Greetings, I'm John Carl. Welcome to the Retirement Spectrum, our podcast where we cover the spectrum of the thought leaders that represent the best minds and practitioners in our retirement industry. Today, we have the pleasure of chatting with none other than Andy Larson, the Chief Education Director of the Retirement Learning Center. Andy, welcome to the Retirement Spectrum.
Thank you, Johnny. Appreciate the chance to chat.
Well, this is just good fun, Andy, getting to interview you on the retirement spectrum. As often called the Brainerd Sage, our senior member of the Retirement Learning Center staff. What we like to do, Andy, on this program, though, before we get into some of the more prescient things going on in the industry that you're working on, is just to get to know a little bit of the background of the man behind the bow tie, as they would say. Who is Andy Larson? Where did you grow up? What are some memorable things? What would resonate with some of the folks out there so they get a real feel for who Andy Larson is?
Well, there's not much to tell. I'm still living in my hometown. Many would say that I've never grown up and moved away from home. So I'm still in Brainerd, Minnesota. I was very fortunate that after college, I was offered a job by really one of this industry's pioneers, a gentleman by the name of Arnie Johnson that founded the firm Universal Pensions, which has now evolved into what is a census. And when Arnie hired me, let's just say that Jimmy Carter was still in the White House. So I've been fortunate in terms of in this industry, I've had opportunity to do just about every job in every part of the industry, from drafting plan documents to actuarial to some programming and DBA work, consulting. And although I may have done most of the jobs at one time or another, I would clearly never say that I did most of them very well. In fact, some of my programming was legendary in terms of what it didn't accomplish. But it did give me a sense of really the industry from the DNA of plans and participants up. And it's just been helpful from an insight perspective that, as this industry is a very dynamic one, it's just shocking to me how it's evolved, specifically to meet the needs of participants and plan sponsors. And frankly, I'm proud of the industry in and of itself, what it's done really on its own, simply reacting to the needs of the consumers. It's something that I think we need to give ourselves some credit for if we look how far we've come in the last 40 years.
Well, I think that's brilliant stuff. Now, I will have to say, Andy, I did some forensic analysis into your background. And before you started doing balance forward record keeping, which I believe you actually did in your history, you actually worked as a bartender at Madden's on the lake, if I'm not mistaken. Is that an accurate claim?
Your intel is correct. And in the modern era of full and complete disclosure, I will admit that bartending was, in fact, the last job that I had that I really knew what I was doing.
Well, that's excellent. And obviously developed your listening and storytelling skills, which you use actively on a daily basis now at the Retirement Learning Center. But to your point, Andy, you have had such a broad background. It really puts you in a role in RLC where you get a lot of exposure to a lot of different things. But I know by and large, you were probably the greatest road warrior over the great majority of your professional career, including at RLC. You were traveling, some 100 plus days a year prior to this pandemic. Is that accurate?
I have had plenty of airplane time. And to be honest with you, I am proud of the fact that I've done events and presentations in all 50 states.
Yeah, and pretty much you would go on the road with the appropriate partner wholesaler of RLC, and get in front of their advisors and the advisors' clients, if I'm not mistaken. So you'd be obviously training the advisors, but then also partnering with those advisors, getting the appropriate messages, highlighting their acumen and capabilities to their ultimate clients.
And that's been a real opportunity for me to work with not only small teams with smaller plans, but also with the largest teams, and the biggest plans. And what's been fun is to see the different needs, but also the similarities in terms of needs and challenges from the large market, intermediate, and small market, and then just getting to know the different personalities of teams and getting to see the common threads that run through the successful teams, whether they're small market or large market. There is some commonality there, and that's been real interesting to watch and participate in.
Well, if I may pin you down, maybe we'll give you the top three. What are your top three favorite cities or towns that you've had the pleasure and privilege of working with? To your point, when you come to town, you get to work with the best and the brightest advisor practitioners. What are your three favorite places to go?
My three favorite places to go. Well, I have to say that number one probably is Anchorage. I love Alaska. It kind of reminds me of a warm version of Minnesota with mountains. Conversely, I like Austin, Texas, perhaps a bit selfishly as I have family there. But at the same time, there's parts of Florida that are pretty appealing also.
Well, there you go. I know you've been doing a ton of traveling, but now with the pandemic, obviously a lot of that has flipped into virtual. And I'm assuming that you've taken a good part in that virtual CE training that RLC offers. And tell us a little bit about that experience and how you find that.
The virtual experience, again, when you're talking to someone that's done face-to-face for almost 40 years, the virtual experience is difficult. What I enjoy about face-to-face is that it excites me to see somebody learning something, to see someone struggle with a concept, to answer their questions, and just to watch their face, the body language, their tone change. That's real fulfilling. And the virtual, it's fun doing the mechanical part of training, but it's that interactive piece that personally I miss. The feedback, via our little cameras and screens isn't real life, but it works, and we adapt.
Yeah, it's certainly something you've been doing a lot of, but I can imagine you're hearkening back for the days that you can get back out in some of those great towns that know and love you. I will say, though, I was on the phone earlier today with a good friend of both of ours, Terry Petterini, who is one of the best wholesalers that I've ever had the privilege of working with. He happens to work at Columbia Threadneedle Investments, real professional in our business. And he told me a little secret, Andy, that you apparently were on a webinar. Was it earlier today or was it yesterday with for him with one of his top UBS teams in the country? And you were talking with clients about Medicare. Is this accurate, Andy? Tell us how that went.
We had an excellent Medicare session with a team that actually we've been doing these for this team now for at least 4, if not 5 years. And the fun part there was I got done with my spiel, and to my great pleasant surprise, we actually had audience questions. And actually, in one case, it was a relatively personal question regarding some Medicare issues. So yes, that we do a lot of that. A lot of fun. That's that. As I tell the wholesalers, to me, those kinds of presentations aren't work. That's fun.
Yeah, and I guess you're kind of nailing the best that you could hope to get out of these virtual presentations is empowering the advisory team, which sounds like happen to know you already from many travels, probably, to interact with clients in this constrained environment, but get these clients to open up and source cases back to the client that hopefully, if they need our help at RLC, you can support.
Absolutely. And like in Terry's case, who, by the way, just as an aside, you mentioned his wholesaling prowess. For those of you that don't know Terry is to wholesaling what RoboCop was to law enforcement. He just built for that. That's him. But the nice thing is we have a lot of individuals nationally that have attended our stuff time and time and time again. And you really get the rapport going with the client. And that that drives some value and frankly, some appreciation from the client side.
Well, I guess it's safe to say, Andy, you've been part of RLC, at the origin, the very, very start of the whole thing, going back to 2003. So there is some perpetuity in your presence and your calling card in that, for sure. But a lot of the things, because of your, as you said in your description, which I thought was really important for people to understand, what a broad array of things you've done in our industry, and the kind words you have for the evolution of the industry that you've been a big part of. If I'm not mistaken, you kind of get thrown into the off the beaten path and trail topics that our clients at RLC run into when we kind of say, well, who can handle this one? Well, oh, that sounds like one for Larson. And you actually write a blog about that. So what's the latest and greatest, thing that you've been thrown into that's perhaps off the beaten path from the traditional middle of the plate retirement stuff?
As you've noted, the way I like to put it, if it's ugly and has hair all over it, toss it to me. I think it'd be fun. In some respects, some of the newer issues for me aren't new issues. For example, some of the new regulations and safe harbors on, for example, allowing retirement income products and plans, some of the legislation that ostensibly is promoting portability. I kind of chuckle because we were doing these kinds of things with plans back in the 80s. And a lot of these products sort of lost favor, and now sort of they're getting back in vogue. So a lot of the things that we did and a lot of the approaches and methodologies we used back then with regard to these products are seemingly new for many. For us graybeards, it's clearly a back to the future.
It's funny you bring that up. It's like we talk about, or the industry likes to talk about, the DB-ification of the DC business. And I know I'm getting a chuckle out of you here, probably because of this. But to your point, isn't that, do you see, well, I guess, I'll even go one step further on a specific one. Do you see any life coming back in trustee directed plans, or what do you see this whole DB-ification? What are some of the trends there?
Well, we could go on for hours and hours, and I would be into my martinis by then. But it is odd that the 401ks, especially defined contribution plans in general, in my view, clearly for most participants, the 401k is not some supplementary plan where your lump sum gets set aside for travel or whatever. For most people, the 401k is the primary plan. I call the primary plan a pension because a pension's job is to supply income safely over the lifetime of that individual. And the DC marketplace is, I think, to a large degree, will move toward that, where many participants will elect to go into products, go into plans that operate much as the traditional DB plan did, albeit in a DC environment where the focus is on retirement income, not on what's this quarter's account balance look like. So at a high level, John, I think you're spot on. We're slowly getting momentum in the DC space to where many 401ks for many participants effectively become the pension.
Couldn't agree with you more. And then the Secure Act, certainly, with a safe harbor for guaranteed lifetime income, we're probably maybe in the bottom of the second inning, top of the second inning, bottom of the first, but certainly that's the evolution. And I know you do a lot of work on plan design, but I did want to pick up on a topic that I know that you've been thinking about, and you published an article or a blog on it recently, and that's ESG investing. I think your topic is called, which I find humor with, Finding Your Social Graces with ESG Investing. I just love that title. Tell us what your thoughts are on that. I mean, I'll frame it up in my opinion. It seems like, the DOL and even the previous administration has been made out to be draconian evil. They don't like trees. They don't want to hug them. Do you see it that way, or how do you see this ESG thing playing out, and how do people find their social graces as a plan sponsor with ESG investments?
the validity of a lot of the objections to the DOL's ESG regs, I contend, is no more valid than alchemy or astrology. Frankly, it's nonsense. If you actually read the regs, but more importantly, if you actually read the preamble, and my detractors on this seem to have missed that bit of reading. The preamble is magnificent in terms of saying there's nothing inherently wrong with ESG. And the DOL goes so far to say that, in fact, there's some anecdotal evidence to demonstrate that, in fact, ESG type investments can hold their own. The concern is the rating systems, the sales process, the pay to play, the self-evaluation, the lack of audit. What the DOL is saying to ESG is, guys, get your act together, professionalize, ramp this thing up. You got a good thing going. Secondly, if in fact ESG is as efficacious as the ESG industry says, if it can compete, where's the beef in terms of competing with non-ESG funds on a pecuniary basis? Where's the beef? That's kind of my view of this. I think ESG has a place to play. Ramp your game up, ESG industry. Read the regs, read the preamble, look at the well-documented studies that the DOL relies on. P.S. Probably won't make any difference, because our friends in Europe, the EU, has just taken the lead in terms of what we call ESG regulation. They're going to call the shots. And in fact, at least one of the big US players, Fidelity, has indicated they're going to play ball with the EU. So complain or whine as you wish. ESG is here. And if we follow along with what the DOL is saying, I think everybody's going to win.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And it's funny, you used one of my favorite words, pecuniary, AKA it has to be financially appropriate, right? You're a plan sponsor, you're a fiduciary. So, there are obviously a lot of benefits for ESG investments. Maybe it broadens out the participation in the plan, gets some other folks excited about the plan that otherwise might not be, but you still have to hold it to a financial standard. Fair enough?
Fair enough. And here's your question, Johnny. Pecuniary, what is the root word?
To pecune? I don't know, Andy. You're going to have to enlighten me on that.
Pecos. And what does that mean?
Oh, Pecos. That's got to be a denomination of some type of a coin.
Well, you're close. The root word is the Greek for oxen, which were the mode of exchange in ancient times.
Well, there you have it. The sage from Brainerd bringing us new knowledge on ESG investing. I hope that is in your white paper. Now, Andy, can we be looking forward to you having a training deck for advisors that might give them, CE credit, SEMA CFP, and then maybe more importantly, having a training deck for SHRM and CPA CE for those advisors to take out to the plan sponsors to help them get their act together as it relates to finding their social graces here with ESG investing.
Such tools are being worked on in the skunk works.
I love it when that happens, when a good story comes together. Well, Andy, you and I could go on and on about this, and we will have you back for many and more tantalizing topics on the retirement spectrum. But as our time is up for today, I thank you very much for joining us. This is John Carl signing off on another edition of the Retirement Spectrum.